Welcome to this introduction to levels of detail and visualization style in CityEngine. On the screen here, I have a set of initial shapes, start shapes. They're all identical in size and they're distributed in the plane as to sort of illustrate an urban block setting with some street spaces in between. There's no actual street shapes made, but just some space between all those shapes, all the start shapes. And I've assigned the same script to all shapes. And let's just turn the models on. Turn the shapes off so that we don't get those little dots in the corners. So here you see basically the same script but modified differently, so that what you see is a set of blocks, urban blocks, some with some kind of terraced housing style kinds of buildings, some with urban blocks, open blocks and closed blocks. Some blocks have all same height buildings, some have buildings in different building heights and setbacks and so on and so forth, just to create some variation. Now, this visualization is quite simple, as all buildings are just represented as white boxes. So this is a very like a diagrammatic style of representation, and obviously sometimes we do want some more detail. So what we could do, of course, would be to just add more detail in the script, and then everything would be more detailed. But sometimes you may actually want this kind of white box diagrammatic style of representation for some purposes. Or maybe you want to just keep some parts of your model simple, so as to have a quick redraw on the screen when you work with a large urban environment. Sorry. So rather than just changing the script, we might just add like another option. And over here in the inspector, you see that we have an attribute called LOD, short for level of detail, and that's now set to low. So let's try to just take it up one step to medium, and tack. Now you see that all buildings have roof shapes added to them. Some roofs are have an angle. Some roofs are like hip roofs, while other roofs are gable roofs, or even shed roofs, as down here. You may have alternating roof shapes of gable roofs and flat roofs, and so on and so forth. So that adds obviously much more architectural detail to it. So now you actually see distinct features. So it's not just a simple white box situation, but it's white boxes with some features. But obviously sometimes you would like even more than that. Particularly, let's say we just put ourselves down into this street situation here. Down here, if we're in the street and we have not selected or turned on edges, it can be kind of difficult to evaluate the scale of these buildings. If we put ourselves high up, they may not look very tall, but if we put ourselves far down, then we may evaluate them as being incredibly tall. So maybe we would like some more architectural detail, so as to be more able to evaluate the scale of the buildings. And one way to do that would be to add sort of facade features. So let's try to put it in high. And now you see we actually get some kind of windows and stuff for each floor, which now, regardless of where we put ourselves, it's much more easy to actually understand the scale of the whole situation. But obviously this is still quite simple. Just turn on edges, and you will see that we can now actually evaluate the scale quite well. And even with the edges turned off because of these little recesses or setbacks for all the windows. We get a sort of kind of a 3D effect on the facades, which makes them more easy to evaluate. Well, obviously, up until now, everything has just been white models sitting on kind of like gray surfaces. I put the color gray here, even though it's a white model, to make the buildings stand out from the background, because otherwise, in this kind of shading, may be difficult to see. As in this area, for instance, what is actually part of the building and what is part of the, as in this case, the streetscape. So we will have to go like this to actually see that, of course, unless we turn edges on, which then have other issues, because maybe we don't want all these little edges on windows, etc. So, but we might, of course, want to add some architectural detail. So let's just try to put this thing down to low again. Now we're back to the first situation, the simple boxes. But let's turn the visualization style, because up until now we've only been modifying the level of detail. They were at all times just white, with white surfaces. So we might change the visualization style to, let's say, architectural. And well, this may not look very architectural, of course, but at least now we have some facade color. It's said to be the same across the entire scheme here. It could be varying, of course, according to the architectural design and how the script was made. You also see here that all private open spaces inside the blocks have turned kind of pale green, so as to make them again stand out from the street spaces in between. So actually this is, I mean, not much else than the white model, but at least you have some color to give a sense of what is a building and what is some other kind of structure. And similarly, we may, in the visualization style of architectural, change the level of detail. So putting this to medium, now suddenly we get roof shapes, and we even get colored roofs. Well, not for flat roofs actually, but that of course could be done. So now you have a roof color and a facade color. So again, when you zoom out a bit, this could be almost like a kind of miniature physical model city, where you wouldn't necessarily detail all the facades, but you would have some kind of model which could be colored so as to make different parts of the model stand out differently. And of course, if again we turn on a higher level of detail, put it to high, zack, it'll take a while to regenerate, because now there's a lot of shapes. Now, just like with the white model, we now have facades with windows, but as you may realize, differently from the white model, now windows in this case have been set to render with transparency, so now we can actually look through the building, and we may even have like window frames and stuff. We can select this and go down and turn on a different window frame style. Rather than 2 panes vertical, just put a single pane. This then will apply across the entire start shape, of course. So every building now in this lot or urban block, as it could be, will have single pane windows, whereas the others will have something else. So an incredible flexibility to sort of parametrically make variations to different elements at different levels in different parts of the urban model. So now, of course, we don't always want like a 3D model visualization style. We may actually sometimes just want something else, And really the power of adding these different visualization styles and levels of detail into the script is quite important also in terms of the production flow of an architectural design, because we don't always necessarily want to do like photorealistic render style kind of images. Sometimes we may actually want to do a different style, of graphic style, like a more simplified view, or like maybe we want to show land use rather than architectural features. Maybe we just want the model to be like a white box diagrammatic background for adding flow lines for the traffic system or something like that. And obviously we can do all of this by means of conventional design techniques in Illustrator and other places, but we might as well just put the power of parametric design to that end as well. So we may, as one, let's say, quite common visualization style or graphic representation in architecture is the figure ground plan, where everything is shown in white except for buildings, which are shown in black. And now I've changed to a top view, and you see there's still a perspective view, so the further we are to the sides, the more we see of the facades, either left or right. And here in the middle, we see things kind of top down. So there's this 3D perspective view, basically top view. But if we change over here the visualization style from architectural to, in this case, figure ground, zack. Now we have this kind of nollie map, which actually does not have 3D elements, because this was added somewhere in the script before buildings were even extruded. So in that sense, it's quite easy. And it's also important in the sense that one of the powers of parametric design is that you can modify your design up until the very last minute, so that you get more design time, so to speak. But if you still have to do all these different types of visual representations manually after you finish the design, you still need to put in a lot of work and a lot of time, particularly. And you may not always have that when you have to finish up a design. So in that sense, it's actually quite neat to be able to change different levels of design, a level of detail, and different visualization styles within the same model, because then it's just a matter of changing the values of the different attributes over here, and you can export all your different graphics, or you can export to whatever render engine or whatever you want to do post-processing in, and still save tons of time. Now, another advantage of this approach, of course, is that sometimes we want to just show not everything in the same style, but have our own design standing out. Let's say, for the sake of the example, that everything here is context for this fellow, which is then our design. Maybe we actually designed this, and then for that reason we want it to stand out. So we will put everything else to medium. So we will skip the facades and just take like the building envelopes, but not just like white boxes, still with architectural features such as roofs, etc. And then we'll select only this one and do something else. Rather than white, we'll do it architectural. And obviously we want to render this in a high level of detail, so that when we look at it now, we can actually have it stand out, still in the context of the surrounding city, but in a way that it's actually quite easy to see what is our design and what is the context of the design. So in that sense, and we might even want to just take the neighboring lots and say for those we want a or like a high level of detail, but we'll still keep them white, so that it's possible to actually evaluate the architectural style of our design against the context of the city. And we don't really need that kind of architectural detail in the background, because that's just too far away anyway. And that brings us to another point of why we want to be able to change the level of detail, because actually whenever we do more detail, we also generate more geometry. If we take this one over here, for instance, with a relatively low level of detail, even if, I mean, at the very lowest level, we simply have 8 boxes sitting on a 2D shape. And a box takes only 8 vertices for the top and for the bottom to describe the geometry. So it'll contain only very little geometric information here, or have very few vertices. And as soon as we add we increase the level of detail, now, first of all, we have stacked floors. Well, we don't actually see those when we deselect the building, but we might say have a land use representation here, where we want to show that there's stores at the ground floor and housing at the upper floors or whatever. But we also have particular roofs here which add yet more vertices. So now the model actually has many more vertices, and needless to say, as soon as we add, architectural detail, now we have tons and tons of vertices for each window at the front, like the front part and the back. So each window now, in fact, has as many vertices as before just one building would have. So that's quite obvious that we will very quickly have a very high number of vertices, and when the system needs to juggle that in terms of computer power or performance, it'll slow down things if the model is very big. Obviously, here we have a mere, say, 6-10 blocks or so. But if we have an entire neighborhood or even a city, that's obviously quite a substantial amount of geometry. This is also true in terms of if we want to take the model into like a game engine, either for VR or other purposes, then we really need to consider the level of detail in terms of keeping the performance of the computer at an absolute maximum. So, yeah, obviously we could imagine any other type of rendering. I haven't even addressed the issue of texturing here. Obviously now buildings are simply colored, but we could add like a brick or concrete or wood texture for any surface basically, and roof tiles for the roofs, etc. That could be like a grass texture, and obviously there could be all kinds of open space detailing, trees, shrubs and hedges, and even street inventory, lamps and benches and whatever we might imagine. I mean, we could we could add as much detail as we'd like, of course, but we could also do something completely different. We might actually simulate this as if it was like a physical model, like a working model. And just to give you an example of that, we might here change the visualization style to model. And what we see here is now that suddenly the horizontal faces turn into like a corrugated cardboard structure. This is actually a texture. So, and as you see here, all buildings were had a texture added as if they were carved out of styrofoam blocks, as one would do in a physical model. And if we just take a look around, we're now actually inside a physical model, which is quite neat actually. And one thing which is obvious here is that you would never carve windows in a styrofoam model, but in a 3D model, of course, you can simulate that. So that would actually be adding a new form of visual representation, which we didn't have before. And again, we could, of course, say that, well, all parts except that one, we want to do in low, or yeah, let's just say low. And then, oops, and this one we want to turn up to high. So again, even if it's represented as a cardboard model, our own project will stand out with more detail and thus be more recognizable against the context, which now has been carved, as you might actually imagine a styrofoam model to be made as a rough model. Anyway, so how does all of this work? Well, obviously these different elements are generated different places in the script. And if we just take this one block here and try to look at the inspector, we can see that the top level here is a script called example block 02 rule. And then nested inside of that by means of the import function is another rule, which is called building 01 rule. And this is actually the next level of the model, because one script simply makes the site layout, like saying placeholders for footprints and designation of open spaces. And then the buildings are made in the next script. And again, nested inside of that is a facade script, which takes care of generating only the facade. And even below that, in this case, I've done like a separate script for only making this recessed part with the window, so that I can reuse it with any given facade. So that's also where if we turn the representation back to architectural for this one, now you see the windows have frames in various forms, and that, for instance, can be changed in the opening script, so that rather than 2 panes or a single pane as before, we can do 2 panes horizontal, or even 3 panes like this, or 4, etc. And this, of course, can all be scripted. This is actually terrible to look at, the way it has been designed. It always attempts to do a square at the top, so let's not do that. But 3 panes, well, it does the same 2:1 scale, so we wouldn't want any of those with this type of windows in this case. Anyway, so what we see here is that scripts have been nested, and obviously all these different informations about a level of detail address different scripts in different ways. Obviously, when we set the visualization style to white and low. Only the site design script and the building envelope script are activated. We don't even get near the facades, so we never reach the facade script in this case. So everything that happens at the low level of detail happens only in those two scripts. So that's where we're actually adding stuff for low. And say, as soon as we add roof shapes, we need to basically do a component split for the box and separate it into its sides and its top so that we can generate a roof shape on the top. That happens in the building script. And if we just take a look at the actual script, which is over here, what you see here is that the level of detail is a very simple attribute. It's simply set to low and can alternate between low, medium, and high. That's what we get over here. And then the visualization style has more options. We've looked into the white, the architectural, the figure ground, and the model versions, and you can see here that even more different visualization styles have been sort of anticipated, but haven't been coded yet, so they're sort of like cancelled out. You also see here something which is basically just internal to the script, because low, medium, high it can be laborious to evaluate, so I made an attribute which is hidden. That's why you cannot see it over here, which I call LOD value, and it simply translates low, medium, and high to three figures of 0, 1, and 2, because then I can use the equal to, larger than, smaller than, etc. Sort of operators in the script, so that makes it more easy to work with. But 0, 1, 2 is not as neat over here as low, medium, high. It's more explanatory what that means. So some stuff is controlled in the attributes, but down here, for instance, you can see that for the backyard, that is this space here. We've seen it gray like here, we've seen it with a cardboard texture like here, and we've also seen it green. So what I do here is for the backyard shape to say, in case of the visualization style is set to white, I will color it, but not white. Oops. I'll color it slightly, tinted light gray. So as I said earlier, to get the building, have the building stand out against the gray. If the visualization style is set to figure ground map, obviously we want the ground to be white. So that's why I added the color white at this point. And in case the visualization style is set to model, then it will send that shape on to the next script, which in this case is the texture 01 script, and to the rule in that script, which is called cardboard 01, which is the one that produces the corrugated cardboard texture. And as you may know, import works simply dragging a rule from the navigator into your script, and then you create a link between this script and another script by means of the import command here, and then this becomes your prefix, and only edit out the dash or underscore rule thing, and then I can simply take this and put as a prefix to my rule, and that's what you see here for texture 01. That is actually this prefix up here, saying, well, when the script encounters this, please go to this rule, and this is the path in the file system the rule is called texture01_rule.cga, so it's a script, and it's in the folder called rules within that same project folder. So that's how we link stuff together. And yeah, I just want to edit out this one up here before I forget, because we didn't actually link to that. So, and basically what you see here, building 01A and texture 01, is what you also get over here when you select one. This building 01A is actually whatever you call this prefix. So you may give it intelligent names that makes it more easy to actually trace where these different, what these different parts do. If you haven't done so already in the naming of your CGA file, because as you may have noticed, it'll simply give the file name as the prefix up here. So this was the backyard, and that's actually all that happens at this level, because everything else than exterior spaces is sent on to the next script, which in this case is the building 01A script. So let's take a look at that. Scroll to the top. This is significantly longer. So this one also imports a number of other scripts. Facade 1, which actually we don't use at this point. Facade 04 and texture 01. Texture is for whatever surfaces that are sent off for this model visualization style directly from the building rule. And we have the same here attributes for visualization and level of detail, etc., etc. So let's go down here. There's a lot of stuff. Let's go and see if we can find. Yeah, we have one here. That's the shape where, in case the visualization style is set to figure ground map. Well, actually that's redundant, because we never reached there from the previous script, because figure ground here just colors the thing. It doesn't send it anywhere else. So no, now I'm babbling. It's actually here that is simply coloring, and if it's not the figure ground map, sorry, then it'll send it on to an extrude and actually create the 3D volume. So you will not even have the volume if it's set to figure ground. It'll simply just color the thing black, as indicated by this color code. Also, this little shape is carved out and turned into a ground shape. And so for ground we do a similar thing. In case the visualization style is a white, color it in the same grayish color so that it'll match what happens at the previous level in this sequence or this daisy chain of scripts. Figure ground, that's where we want it to be white. Model, that's where we want to send it on to the next. And here you see it's actually been colored white first, and that's because higher up in the script it has been assigned a different color, which we then want to cancel out. So it could have been done differently, of course, but very often scripts develop from one set of ideas into another set of ideas, and rather than rewriting the whole script, you make little amendments like that. So, and otherwise it'll just have the backyard color, which in this case what was that kind of a light green color we had. This one. Good. And so you see here there is a level of detail situation, and rather than the actual level of detail, I use the level of detail value here, which is 1. And then that'll send stuff off in one direction, whereas other values will send it off somewhere else. In this case, it'll send it on to the next level, and that's because If the level of detail value is 0, which is low, facade will never happen in this script, because then the whole box will simply be, textured. And only at the level of the facade, where we have levels 1 and 2 for medium and high, we want different things to happen to it. And Z01 here actually has been added to make it possible to do the model style. Again, this texture with the styrofoam, rather than sending it off to the facade wall. And yeah, similar stuff. So let's just quickly go into the facade 04 room. Again, we've copied the attributes, so they're up here, exactly the same attributes: level of detail value, and visualization style, with the same kind of options and so on. And that's because when we copy those, as you may have noticed, whenever I changed stuff, regardless of whether the different renderings actually happened in different parts of the script, I only changed it at the top level, the example block 02 rule. And that's because the system, CityEngine, passes on identical attributes that have the same name and the same syntax. Has been sent, they will send them on, provided they're set to the default value. That's when you have text here in regular style, rather than if we set it at this level, we'll get, it'll override what happens up here. But if we set it to the default value, it'll do as it's told from above. So this actually trickles down, so that if we set it to medium here, it'll pass that information on to whatever subsequent level of scripts that have been imported and imported into imported scripts, etc. You also see the slight indenting here, indicating the nesting. So texture 01 is linked to opening 01, which is linked to facade 04, which is linked to building 01A. And it can be quite confusing here after a while, because you see texture 1 is linked not just to opening 1, but it's also linked to facade 04. And oh my god, it's even linked to building 01. So texture turns out 3 times here, but it does different things at different levels. So try to make sure that everything you want to set at the top level is set to the default value further down, because otherwise it'll override whatever you set at the top level. Yeah. So just to round up, these different settings or attributes are identical across the different rules, and that's the tricky part. Wherever you want to do, wherever it has an impact to change whatever level of detail, say for instance, when we have the white visualization style with level of detail being high, we want this recess, the setbacks for the window niches, so to speak, but we don't want the window panes, and we don't want the window frames, and we definitely do not want transparency. So that's taken care of actually as far down as in the opening rule. So if we take a look at that, we can see here what the opening basically has small sets of wall, which are all these small narrow spaces here. This is part of a wall, and then there's the actual space for the window. So wall needs to address the different visualization styles and act accordingly, and so does actually higher up where the setback is done. It's here we translate the opening shape and we extrude it, and then in case B1 in this script. There we want to set, unless we have the architectural style, we do not want to create all the single pane, two pane, blah, blah, blah. We simply want to color the entire shape, either with its analytical color, its wall color, architectural color, or we want to texture it as for the model with a particular texture. So that's actually being controlled as far down as in the opening script. And texture actually does nothing else than adding a styrofoam texture and a cardboard texture with all the settings it takes to actually control the behavior of textures. So let's not dwell at that. So summing up, level of detail is a way to reduce the complexity of the model geometry. It can be set. In this case, I've only added 3 levels: low, medium, high, and that should be enough for most use cases. And then visualization style, which sort of goes closely hand in hand with level of detail, is where we can have different representations, so as to visualize the model in many different ways. So now we actually have a styrofoam rough model with an inset of our design, which is then visualized in like an architectural style. So hopefully this gave an idea of the power of working with level of detail and visualization style in combination, so as to be able to produce many different visual representations of the same parametric model, so that depending on the need, both while you work, because you want to keep stuff that you don't really work on low, if you want to generate it at all, but that can be handy sometimes. If you want to control this in the context of the existing environment, then you can set the environment to low and you can do your adjustments. Or whenever you finish and you want to do your end graphics, sometimes you may actually want an image like this. So that's the power of being able to set different visualization styles and levels of detail also for the final output. Thank you very much.